Okay, so we are here for a little special session. Let's do a quick roll call. Commissioner Sinya, what is your last name?
Shen.
Shen.
Sinya Shen.
Here. Commissioner Gordon.
Here.
Mr. Miyagi.
Here.
And Commissioner McDowell. Okay. So any proposals for agenda changes, announcements? No. Okay. So our first action item, one action item, is the relates to the fire station and the Pete Beeman piece. If everyone had a chance, we'll go there.
So thank you, everybody, for taking the time to come for a special meeting today. Artist Pete Beeman was selected and approved by the commission for the artwork at Fire Station 3 some time ago. But let me just reorient you with the site. Do we have both of these available, or just this one? So I'm sorry, but keep in mind that this screen, it's a little bit skewed, so things are going to show a little off ratio. So what you're looking at is the site of Fire Station 3, which is at the corner of Embarcadero Road and Newell Road. Directly across the street, across Newell, is the Palo Alto Art Center. And that bike lane across Newell Road is extremely busy. You have Jordan Middle School just down the way, Walter Hayes. You have lots of kids on bikes during peak hours there. And here what you see are a few renderings of the fire station. Again, it's a little bit skewed, so it looks a little taller and narrower than it normally would. And some of the intent here was, so this is, I'm sorry, the larger image is the view from Newell Road. So if you're standing across the street at the Art Center near their big new Art Center and Library sign, that would be what you see. And so there was an overall desire to make sure that pedestrians were not approaching the fire station by the drive lanes where the fire trucks actually come out along Embarcadero, which has been a bit of an issue. So really to open up and call out that visitor entrance along Newell Road so that people and families are not lingering in those drive stations, in those drive aisles. And there's going to be some regular seating up on the plaza. There's a bike, what do you call it? A bike maintenance station, so that if you need to fix a flat, if you need some assistance there, you can get it. And of course, at that fire station, they do quite a few of the bike registrations.
Sorry.
Well, hello.
No, I'm sorry. I'm just getting ready for tonight.
Okay. So the intent was, you can see a bunch of the writers here, was to animate that entrance and to make sure that we're not hindering or distracting any of the drivers. So because we have that larger bright colored sign across the street at the Art Center and Library, the panel really felt as though we didn't necessarily want to do something else that was as bright and cartoony in a way. Something that's a little bit more subtle, but still engaging to all different audiences, and in particular, families. So just as a refresher, here's a rendering of the sign. Is that a rendering or an actual photo? It's hard to tell because the sign does really look like that. And so continue the next slide, please. So these were some of the project goals for the artwork. And while we can't necessarily enhance bike and pedestrian safety, we wanted to make sure we weren't jeopardizing bike and pedestrian safety there. And so here's some sample work for Pete Beeman. So just going back for a second on some of the basics, because I know we also have a new commissioner this time around. The project budget for this is extremely limited at $50,000. And so we put together from our pre-qualified pool a roster of 38 artists who submitted their applications for a pre-qualified pool. Staff narrowed it down to 19 that were taken to a selection panel. That selection panel selected 4 artists to interview. And on that selection panel, we had Dara Olmsted, who was until very recently a public art commissioner. Catherine Capriles she's the deputy fire chief. Ken Edwards, who was formerly one of our Cubberley artists, community member, and a retired firefighter. The architect for the project, Fred Metzger. Lucy Larson from the Palo Alto Art Center staff, and Raina Halpern, the assistant director for CSD. And so I just wanted to walk you through a few of Pete's previous works. This was a piece that was actually done for another fire station. And a lot of what Pete does, he comes from an engineering background, and a lot of what he does are these kinetic sculptures that involve some sort of crank or turn. So if you look at the bottom of that shaft where that round dark area is, that's where people can go turn the crank, and these tools that evoke some of the firefighting tools sort of open and close in this almost bird-like fashion. Someone did equate it to like a phoenix. Let's go next. And so these are a series of sculptures he did, I believe, in Kansas City. And one of the pieces that the panel really gravitated to was at the top. It's a crank bench. So you sit on the bench, and you can crank the side, and it moves down the shaft back and forth. And then you can see on the lower left, there's one that's a photo op, these wings with this sort of different level steps so that adults and children could do their portraits in front of them. But he was doing some basic wayfinding and engaging public art in this area of Kansas City. And so what we determined was, after looking at the budget and potential placement for artwork, Pete really wanted to explore the idea of doing a different version of a crank bench for Palo Alto. And so in looking at the Newell side of the road, you can see it would be just to the right of the plaza, just off the sidewalk area. So it's something that would have high visibility from the road, but putting it actually up in the plaza really limited our ability to have a bench as large as we could or have a track as long as we could. So we decided that this would give it better visibility and probably attract more people to stop and come explore. And so what was interesting, Pete did a number of different iterations of crank benches, playing with all different imagery. And one of the things that became really apparent in our discussions with the fire department as we were exploring some of the visual vocabulary is that they kept, there was some hesitancy to really get too into the tools that they use, that they were really interested in this idea of their overarching duty as the helping hands of the community, that they're there, you know, they're first responders, they're, you know, that fighting fires are just one piece of what they do, that they're really sort of an integral part of the care and keeping of the community. And so Pete started playing with this vocabulary of the hands, which really resonated well with the panel. We did explore a few different options that quickly became a little too busy or a little more tool-oriented than the stakeholders really wanted. And so he went ahead and further developed this hands concept with the bench itself integrating some of those tools. So it would help some people make a little bit more of a connection to the actual fire station itself. And so this just gives you a little bit clearer picture of the kind of scale we're looking at and the materials. And so it would allow for a pretty nice long shaft for the crank.
What are the materials?
They're steel, and I think it's that compressed plastic that looks like wood decking.
Mm-hmm. The hands are steel?
Yes. Yes, so it's all very durable. You know, we do have to oil some of the components a couple times a year for the crank, but essentially, you know, 2, 3, 4 very petite people could sit on the bench and crank their way from one end to the other. And it is on a slip drive, so as you get to the end or you hit any resistance, it automatically reverses track. So what we are asking today, and the reason for the time crunch, is that the artist splits his time between the East Coast and the West Coast. So he's on the West Coast now, and would like to complete fabrication before he relocates to the East Coast, so he can fabricate on the West Coast and store it until the site is ready to receive the artwork. And if we waited till July, it wouldn't allow him ample time to complete that process. So we are here asking for the commission's approval for Pete Beeman to move ahead with his detailed construction drawings and fabrication of the artwork. And I'm happy to take any questions.
I have a question related to when you first talked about the entrance for the fire station, and you were saying we were trying to keep some pedestrians away from that for safety reasons. And I just want to make sure it's clear in my head the location of this, because this is obviously going to be attracting audience relative to the entrance that we're trying to keep people away from.
Actually, it's great that you brought that up, Sonia, thank you. So as you look at this drawing, at the bottom, you'll see the steps leading up from Newell Road, and his artwork would be along the Newell Road side. What we're trying to keep people away from is that Embarcadero Road where the trucks come out, which is currently an issue because people tend to approach the fire station there. So trying to bring more of that pedestrian focus to the Newell side is one of the purposes of the artwork.
So basically you're relocating potential traffic.
Yes, we're trying to make sure that that plaza functions as the draw for pedestrians to approach the fire station.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks.
Other questions? I had just a couple. So the hands, could you bring up the thing that had the scale again, or the dimensions? There we go. So so how high off the ground is it? I don't know if I can read it quite right. So it's from grade, there's a platform, and then the top of the piece? This doesn't have dimensions on it. Let's see.
This, yeah, it's on the screen. It looks
The little
like
screen.
7.
Yes,
Is
they
that
are there.
7?
So I think it's,
No, it's 9. I'll pull it up. To the top of the fingertip. I'm sorry, to the top of the fingertip, that looks like 7 feet or 9 feet.
and are the hands are, is it stainless steel? What's the material that it's going to be made? Or do we know what the materials would be? Like how thick is it going to be? Is it something someone could lean back against?
It would absolutely be something someone could lean back against, like the version he did in Kansas City with the heads.
Right.
But that's part of the reason he needs to go into the engineered
Okay.
drawings to determine the exact width of all of those.
Got it.
It is hard to see, but it looks like 5/8 for the stainless steel back, but I could.
Yeah, you're right. I see it now. All right, I will bring my reading glasses next time. I apologize.
I'm sorry, my computer's lagging behind. Okay.
No, it's up. Okay. So around so it looks like the 8 or 9 feet from grade to the top of the hands, roughly.
Yes, and that includes those lower elements that go under the track. So you see that's also including the anchor pieces that are embedded into the track,
Yep.
right? So you've got a little bit that's below grade.
Okay.
So in looking at this, which doesn't have all of it on here, but from the bottom of the wheel to the seat top is, let's see, yeah, 1.5 feet. And then it's another 2 feet 9 inches high of the hands from the deck to the top of the fingertips.
That's a 2. Okay.
So the whole thing is more like 4 feet tall.
Oh,
Okay.
It's not, I mean, it's a bench with a back to it. It's not going to be enormous.
Oh, okay.
And
And-
so then it does call out I think there is some other decking on it, but the actual seat part, it is called out as ipe wood.
Got it. Okay. And the dimensions of the little track that you scoot back and forth on, how much space do you have to work with there?
The track length, I believe he said was 22 feet.
Oh, that's
No,
fine. So,
it's 12 feet, I'm sorry. It's
12 feet.
12 feet across.
okay, so essentially the bench the part you can sit on the car is around 6 feet, or 5.5 feet long, and you can go essentially one width of it. Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
So yes, the bench is 5 feet 6 inches long, and then you've got a 12-foot track.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Could I ask something? So, for perspective, I'm guessing this is 3 feet? You guys who are
Maybe.
familiar with that, 3 feet.
Yeah, about that.
So it's going to go up how much higher?
No, I
So
think
I'm
the bench
5'5". Is it my height?
It's not quite your height, the tops of the hands.
Okay,
So the seat, it looks like the seat is, from the wheels to the seat is 1.5, so 1.5 feet. Is that what you're seeing on the dimensions too?
Yes.
okay.
So to
the
sit
seat's
down,
gonna be down, I will be
18
down
inches.
Here, maybe like I am here. Is that 1.5 feet, roughly?
Yeah, maybe a little bit higher because there's a step. So that's about right.
And then behind me are the hands. And they go up to about what do you say, 5 feet?
About 4 feet.
About 4 feet.
So that would be approximately here, at the highest point.
Okay. It's hard to get the perspective from the drawing.
It is. And also, if you recall, because the way that projects, I'm not sure, right? So that makes everything look more condensed and taller than it is because of the way it condenses everything.
Can you go back to the picture of the example that this is based on? Because I think that particular picture had a human in it for scale.
Oh, yes. On the bike in the background.
Yeah.
Great, that's actually super helpful.
And one other quick thing I'll throw out there for the artist to be aware of, where the hands spread, he said it's a 4-inch spread, so just confirming that that follows code for bench seating and stuff. And
Absolutely.
okay, thanks.
He's very buttoned up on that. As I said, he comes from an engineering background, and he's been in public art long enough to understand what regulations he needs to go through. Yeah.
So let me ask one more thing.
Sure.
If you don't mind, Jim. The jump from, and it's true, our firefighters, probably 95% of their calls are paramedic calls. But I'm thinking, will the public get the hands? What do you all think? Is that obvious that when you have hands in front of a fire station, it looks like we're here to help?
My sense of the hands is generally, I think when they use hands, it's always helpful hands. I think in a lot of, like they were saying, vocabulary-wise, and I didn't really think of it that way, but they also have a lot of symbolism underneath that had some of the tools, like the,
There you are.
the cranks and other tools. So I think it's a combination of those different visual symbolisms coming together.
And there was some concern, there was an initial version that was just the hands without any of the implements and the tools. And so we did integrate those to make sure that people would get the link
Would get the
between the two.
connection. Interesting.
Well, and I think the medical symbol in the front helps as well as for first responders. Now, the hands, I have a question about climbability with young kids, sharp edges maybe on the hands. That could be, and I don't know how thick those hands are going to be. From the other picture that we saw, the one example, they look pretty thick.
5/8 thick.
5/8 of an inch thick? Okay, so if somebody climbs on it, we don't want to bend over backwards or forwards or something. So, that's, with young kids, that's always a concern.
Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks for the good discussion.
Great, thank you. So our next meeting is on the 20th of July. Thank you very much for doing this special session. Thank you guys for putting it together.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we're adjourned.